Coming up on Locked On Nuggets, we had a whole plan of what we were going to do, and then we got into an argument before the show started, so we're making it up as we go. Ryan has decided to retroactively judge things based off of things that happened afterwards.
I tell
we're
the
going to talk about the time-space continuum today on Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making this part of your day, being with us Monday through Friday, hanging out with us, being an everydayer, and being with us through thick and thin and all the good times and all the bad here on Locked On Nuggets. We appreciate you being part of our community, joining us on podcasts where we appreciate 5-star reviews, or at youtube.com where you can join the over 9,000 folks as we steam towards 10,000. We are so glad that you're with us today and every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. My name is Matt Moore. I write a Substack called The Denver Dig. I'm also a senior NBA writer at the Action Network. His name's Ryan Blackburn. He's the senior Nuggets writer at Mile High Sports. You can catch the Pickaxe and Roll podcast every single day. We had a whole plan for today's show. Yeah, and it wasn't like we were planning it for days. That's why I'm okay with it, because I was like, hey, well, I was thinking about this. Let's go do this. We were going to do 5-star reviews, but then we got into an argument before the show. And so we're just going to talk about this because I think it's better content. And the goal for me, well, I'm going to say I'm going to fail. I'm going to try and not be the hated one because everybody's going to hate me and love you.
Yeah.
And that's just how it's going to go. So it's going to be one of those shows.
Because I'm right.
Give the people the setup that you gave to me.
All right. So effectively, I was watching a YouTube video earlier today, and people were like, there was an ESPN list. The ESPN Top 100 list had come out, and this person was reacting to it at the middle of the season, laughing at some takes that they had said. Ha, 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 ESPN so dumb, yeah, like things like that. And I was listing off some names, and we got to Michael Porter Jr. He was ranked 89th overall on the ESPN Top 100 list. And I was like, that's laughable. Like, there was no reason that he should have been ranked that low. Not like that. That was absurd at the moment. And Matt gave me this face like, huh? Are you sure? You sure about that? You stupid little boy. You stupid fan. You like that's what you're saying. Yeah, okay.
Did not say that.
And I was like,
never
yeah, no, I don't. I absolutely do not think that he should have been ranked 89th in the league. Like that was stupid.
Okay. So there's a couple things to go through here. One is the first fallacy I think you're making is unless you do the list,
and I did.
Okay. Where did you have him?
I had him in the 65 range, like in about 65. I'm not going to sit here and say he's a top 50 player. He may not even be a top 60 player. He has
going into the season. I want to be very clear on this. Going into the season. So the important part here is going into the season, right? Because what set me off was because Ryan's like, well, the list is supposed to be predictive. The list is supposed to be predictive, right? Yeah. It should be judged off of what was good analysis for the prediction, not matching it with what has happened. Because Ryan and I both agree that MPJ's may try. Like, I think you got to have him top 50 this year. Like, he's been the second best player on the Denver Nuggets. He's been the second best player on the 2 seed in the West. So, sorry, 3 seed, probably 2 seed at some point this week. So, like, I think he's got to be top 50. He's been phenomenal. But like the predictive side of this is really important. Is like, should you have looked going into the year when they made the list? And where should you have had him? I had him 74. That's where I had him. Okay. So you had him 65. I had him 74. The other person had him 89.
Yeah.
I do not know
ESPN,
that you can make a jump.
ESPN did.
ESPN did. I don't know that you can make that. But by the way, ESPN, the way that's done is like there's a whole wide swath of people with different perspectives and ideas. And so it's not one person going along and auditing it.
Right.
The idea is that the group effect is supposed to take care of that.
So some people had him lower than 89 at that point.
Yeah, which I think is fine. I think it's totally fine.
All right.
Well, all right. Let's start here. What is Michael Porter Jr. elite at? We know the answer, but go ahead and say it.
Okay. Well, he's an elite shot maker. Yep. That is something that he brings to the
table. Let's get a little more refined, because shot maker implies that there's all types of shots that he can make. Like Jamal Murray in the playoffs, outside of last year, is an elite shot maker. You'd agree with that?
I would agree with that.
Yeah. Porter is not an elite shot maker because we saw what happened in the Wolves series and we saw what happened in the Heat series. He was not an elite shot maker because he doesn't have counters. He's an elite shooter. And if you're like, wait, what's the difference between shooter and shot maker? Shot maker implies a level of creation. It's just implies it. And I would say that he didn't have that going into the season. Again, Mike has it now, which is why his season is so impressive. And why, honestly, he probably deserves to be in the most improved conversation along with Christian a little bit more. But like, would you agree with that assessment that he was a great shooter?
I would say that they're like, that's part of the limitations, right? When you're talking, and when I was talking about his limitations before the season, I was discussing, okay, he's got to add a little bit of juice to his game. He's got to kind of recover some of the things that the Nuggets have kind of ironed out of him by becoming the best possible role player that he could be. There's less freestyling. There's more kind of rigid stuff. He had to be a better defender, had to understand the game as a passer, things like that. And like going into the season, I don't know if it was unfair to say that he could get better at those things. I think in his, like last year's in his age 25 season, he had missed a couple of seasons due to injury. I think guys usually peak at around their 26, 27, 28 years.
That's not true at all. Whoa. They peak. Go back and I have data I'll send you. They peaked 28, 29, 30, my man. Go look at the seasons for all the great players in NBA history, and that's when the curve comes. You're going too early. You think it's like 26. That's not it. Even like most players.
I think of guys like LeBron and Michael Jordan as well in that, where it's really their age 27 seasons was when it really got the like they really became who they were at that point. But like, look, that I think is splitting hairs. The fact is that he was before that. He was before that on the age curve. And so I think it's okay. You keep putting up these hater comments from Don't Tell Santa Cruz. Okay. And the most important thing, like, look, I'm not trying to carry water here for Michael Porter either, by the way. Like, people understand what I've been doing. I was talking about him potentially being traded for Zach LaVine, who is an elite shot maker for what it's worth.
I would agree with that. So here's the thing. So Big Honey says rebounding. I sit next to Ryan Blackburn at every single Nuggets game that I attend. Yeah. Ryan, what's been one of your biggest complaints about Porter?
His hands have always been my second biggest complaint with him. He is not an elite rebounder. That is not true. He is a good rebounder. Like the size that he provides, especially when he's uncontested. Like a lot of people don't go up for those rebounds that Mike is around because he is simply 6'10", and so like that definitely helps. But he is not an elite rebounder. He's not fighting for position all the time. Like that's not what he is.
Let's do 5-star grades on where Porter was and where he is now. I actually think this is really interesting. Okay. Up next, we'll do that. We'll do a 5-star grade of where Porter was and where he is and try and establish why it is exactly a war crime that Michael Porter Jr. was ranked 20 spots lower than Ryan Blackburn thinks. We'll talk about that up next here on Locked On Nuggets. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes the undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. All right, here we go. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us and making this party day. Hit me. What?
I want to just make sure to add to the fact that like he has the best net rating with Nikola Jokic, pretty much of anybody. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason for that is it's not always going to be about what Michael Porter does, or it's not always going to be about what Nikola Jokic does within that pairing. It's what Mike does to help out Jokic and the gravity that he actually has that allows Jokic to operate the way that he does. I'm not just going to use the gravity word to try to set you off. That's not what I'm trying to do. It's more of like some of the off-ball work that he does is like it has truly genuinely improved. And he's like at a borderline elite level with that.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting is it's Porter, Christian, and Jokic. And so it's if you put Jokic with one slasher and one shooter, what happens.
Yeah.
Like part of this is like the Nuggets are doing this without any shooting, but it's also like, look what happens when you give him one shooter.
Yeah.
Imagine if there was more than one shooter on the
True.
floor at a time, although Aaron Gordon is doing his part this season. Okay.
Oh.
So we both agree he's a 5-star shooter.
Yeah.
5-star, 50, 40, 96, 10. Like he's incredible.
Mhm.
And I think his tough shot making has gotten a little bit like the fadeaways aren't as, and like that's kind of been reflective in the numbers a little bit as he's taken more usage. Like he's not like there was a season when he was like what 40.
So last year, by the way, so he was from 16 to 3-point range. He was 54% from the mid range. This year he's 39%. He is not taking as many of those shots, but he has improved around the rim tremendously. He's shooting 78% from 0 to 3 feet. And more importantly, Matt, he is shooting 56.8% from 3 to 10 feet. The dude is like, he's hitting those floaters more and like using the size really, really well. Yeah,
he's a 3-level scorer. Now let's go back though to when the prediction was made that you think was so ridiculous. Was he that kind of finisher? What was his star rating for being a finisher going into the season? A driver.
Ooh, going into the season, I would say,
be honest.
I'll give him 3.5 stars.
What?
I'll give him 3.5 stars.
You would not have said that. You've been like, it's like a 2.
0 to 3 feet in his career.
Think he has hands. If he doesn't have hands, how can he catch the ball to finish?
I think that he catches it way more often than he drops it. It's just the drops are so often so loud.
But also he had trouble with the handle, right? Like we would always talk about like, man, he tries to drive on these guys and he just can't get there.
Right. But I think back to the 2023 playoffs with him, and I think of how many crazy, insane finishes he had around the rim, the up and unders, the reverse layups, the falling to the ground, like hitting his back and everybody going crazy. The fact that like he was about to like pop a blood vessel or something. And like everybody was very worried, but he kept making these plays, man. And like it wasn't perfect. He's not the perfect player, but I do think in the past he has been a great finisher at times. He's been a bad finisher at times, but he's been a great finisher too.
See, this is what drives me nuts though, is you're like, because you talked about how you're like, well, the curve and what you should expect from these young players and you said like, I think it was reasonable to think what he could do, but could is not will. You're saying like, well, he could finish great shots. Yes.
It's not like the bet that you're making in those cases is not that they're going to, you're betting on the possibility, the probability that they are going to do that based off of what history has told you about these guys, based off of the skill sets that they showed early and the ability to kind of retain that and what you're expecting. And like, that's what player evaluation is all about. That's what predictive analysis is all about. And part of the predictive analysis is the fact that he's not 32. He's not 33. He's not going down on the age curve. He's still going up. And expecting him to be at his best in the age 27, 28 range is not crazy. That's just not a crazy thing.
It's not crazy, but it's also not sure. That's the difference is you're like, well, he could do this, but that's not
okay. Let me ask you this then. Why do like the ESPN list that I'm referencing every year, you get the young guys, Brandon Pajimski, for example, who ranked 87 on that list, 2 spots ahead of Michael Porter Jr.
Mm-hmm.
So they assumed and predicted that he would continue to have that trajectory based off of what he had done in one season. But the steadiness that Mike had shown through the first 5 years of his career, like as a steady contributor, a winner on a championship team, that wasn't enough to earn him the benefit of the doubt in that situation. Like,
well, we haven't gotten to the rest of the things. What would you put him at on defense going into the season? 5-star review.
On defense, if 3 stars is average, I'm giving him 2 to 2.5 in that general range. He's a below average defender. This isn't a 1-star thing. Like he can do some things. He's good in isolation defense for some things. And he does have the occasional like weak side rim protection.
So here's the thing though. Okay, let's play your little game. He could do some things. Is it not inaccurate to say that also he can be targeted, exploited, and played off the floor?
He wasn't played off the floor in 2023.
Okay, but you're over-indexing now on 2023. Like you're hyper-indexing this run now, which is not uncommon because your whole thing is Jamal Murray with 15 games.
Well, and every fan, like every analyst of every team that's ever won the championship always thinks about the year that they won the championship. This is not crazy.
So So, but I guess the question is not whether it's crazy, but is it? So this is actually a good question.
I'll say 2 stars. Fine.
But to take it down though, you keep saying like it's not crazy to say this, but is it right?
He's contributed to an above average, solid to borderline elite defense before. It's hard to do that when you're a 1-star player on the court.
Fair. That's a good. That's a good argument. That's a really good argument. I would agree with you. I think 2 stars is where we should get to.
Yeah.
Would you actually agree he's probably been maybe a little bit worse this year?
Than his baseline? Yeah, I would agree. I think as the offense has gotten better and he's had to do more on the offensive end, he's been worse on defense.
Mike P, is this entire show going to be an argument about MPJ? Yes. Just so you're
at this point, yeah. And you guys will love it. This is good.
People will love it.
And if you don't, then you can click off. It's fine.
So I am curious then. All right. So we below average defender 2.
Yeah.
You think he was an average finisher, which I think is, I don't know how you can do that if he can't drive. If the whole thing was, we knew that he had no real ability.
Finishing
to get
is
vertical.
not just about the drives. It's about finishing on cuts. It's about putting back offensive rebounds and things like that. It's about what happens when you get to the rim.
All that, but that has to be a significant chunk of it, though.
Okay.
The ability to drive in traffic has got to be significant here.
If Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, hypothetically, were to shoot 65% at the rim, but it's all tough hezzies and lays and things like that. But Michael Porter shoots 78% at the rim, but it's all off of cuts and offensive rebounds. Who's better?
Shai.
Okay, that's fine. So
Shai, no question.
He's the best finisher in the league, or pretty close to it. He can be 5 stars. Michael Porter can be 3, dude.
Who's better, Lou Dort or Michael Porter Jr.? Going into the season.
Going into the season, I think Michael Porter was a better player going into this. I think the expectation should be that Michael Porter was better going into the season. I think that Lou has had a really great season this year, and I think it's fair to put him above Mike even. I think it's fair.
What do you think Lou shot last year from 3?
I think it was about 38%, I want to say.
Okay. This year it's 41%.
Okay.
He is
what was it last year?
39%.
Okay, so it's not that far off.
You're not far off. You were not far off, but most people think it was like 34.
And to be fair, though, Lou is one of those guys that you dare to make shots, and he made them. He absolutely did.
Can Lou make the kind of cuts that you're talking about being 3-star finishes?
There are some things that he can do that Mike can't. So there are some things that Mike can do that Lou cannot do.
That's probably true. At 6'10", I think that's probably accurate.
Yeah. Though here's the real rub. I think we should get to the KCP side of this argument, because that's what really sets you off in this thing that people don't really know about. Let me tell you my side of the story. When I was talking about people that should not have been ranked above Michael Porter Jr. in the ESPN rankings, I mentioned KCP at 62 when Michael Porter was at 89. And Matt had a conniption. He was freaking pissed. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. And Ryan was going to get those hands on this podcast because I had dared insinuate that Michael Porter was a better player heading into this season than Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Why do you think they let KCP go?
Okay, hang on. All right, so let's go this route. So this front office that you've questioned the entire season.
Yeah.
But now you're going to say, well, they had to have been smart because they let him go.
I don't think it was smart to do it. I think that they bet on their core 4, and KCP was not a part of the core 4.
I agree with that assessment.
I think that he was the 5th best player on the team. I
would like the comments section on this. Ryan thinks that he was Ryan basically dismissed KCP's defense when we were talking from last year.
That's not what I said.
I said that he was I thought he was all defense worthy. And you said statistically, there's no argument.
There are 10 players in the NBA that get all defense. There's 10 of them, and 17 of them are centers. 17. It's really hard for a guard to do it. It's hard. He was probably the 4th best defensive guard.
I promise we'll do grades. We'll do grades tomorrow. I promise. We'll do grades.
Yeah, we'll make it happen.
Why do you think? Okay, so the way you talk about KCP, and also I think going into this year is the big key. KCP was coming off of a year where I thought he was all defense worthy, where he was a contributor to a team that finished with the number 2 seed in the Western Conference again, where he was arguably the best defender on that team, where he continues to be a perfectly competent offensive player consistently. Now, Christian's evolution has made it to where like that's been worth it. I wrote about that. Like Christian's evolution has been amazing offensively. He's blown past KCP, where even though I could talk about all the stuff that you're going to miss about KCP in the playoffs, doesn't matter. The decision was right. Like they were right because Christian's been that good. Now, would it have been nice to have both? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Honestly, yes.
Of course.
Right. I don't know that Christian starting makes them like the numbers say Christian makes them that much better. I don't know if I don't know how to get around. Like if you had this version of Jokic with KCP, what does it look like? Right. Like I think it's hard to
honestly. I mean, KCP's shooting way better than he is right now. The offense in Orlando is a sham. Like it's horrible.
Right.
So like, yeah, believe me, I'm not going to try to use KCP's numbers this year against him. Like it's the Jokic effect, especially on the offensive end. Like he's just not playing next to the same level of talent. There's also a reason why KCP and the Orlando Magic have been such a great defense this year. Those guys are dogs, and KCP is a dog, and he would absolutely help out this team. He is like closer to a role player, I think, based off of what he provides and what he's like, because he doesn't shoot as much, because he doesn't take as much of an offensive role as somebody like Michael Porter Jr. has throughout his career. And you're willing to like go to bat for KCP for that reason, because he's putting in as much effort as possible on the defensive end and trying to connect the team as much as possible. That's not what stars usually do. And Michael Porter's kind of in that like gray zone between a star and somebody who's definitely not good enough to be a star. And like he's being paid like one. He has the usage rate of somebody that's closer to that than somebody that's closer to being a bench player or a role player. So it's hard to talk about value, because I understand why you value KCP more, but I can also understand why everybody else thinks that's dumb.
I don't think this year I would say that at all. I think there's a huge gap based off of this year's performance. Like next year, Mike's going to be top 40 for me, and KCP is going to be where Mike is. Like he, if not out completely. Like that's how far off KCP's shot has fallen. And like I got to grade him on that. Like I just have to. You got to make your shots. You know, I can complain about I have a really hard time with like how much is under your control, but the reality is like you got to make your shots. Like you can't even. It's not even arguable this year. Right. Like I'm looking at the EPM right now. Porter's plus 2.3. It's 90th percentile. KCP's minus 1.3. It's 53rd. So like KCP's still an above average, still contributing player, and he's 80th percentile defensively. That tracks. But like Mike's way beyond. My problem is what I really don't like is what we do is we can't. I think we have to be better about taking when we look back at things, the cold takes. Is trying to put ourselves back into that mindset, because we do this with trades too, or draft, where it's look at how dumb this was. And it's okay. Look back at the moment and how did you feel about it in the moment? What was your decision tree in the moment? Yeah. What was your evaluation of those players in the moment? And that's why I got set off, was the notion that it was ridiculous for ESPN to have done this, when it's like, no, it's pretty reasonable. I think it's totally fine to look at a one-dimensional, non-defensive player who most teams, and like you and I have, I will say this, you and I have a better understanding of Mike's defensive strengths, because we've watched him actually be like, hey, you did really well in that isolation turn. Hey, that was a really good closeout. And the biggest thing is like, Mike cares. Mike cares about winning, and he's done everything, right? I've been a guy that's tried really hard to praise Mike as much as possible, because I've been so impressed with his professionalism. At the same time, I do think that being like, he's like a league average finisher when he can't dribble or couldn't coming in, was like, that to me is really what we're disagreeing on. Is if we break it into shooting, dribbling, and finishing, we just put those together, and defense, and then playmaking, I think we're probably going to agree is like a 2.
Yeah, I mean, it was a 1 before, and now it's a 2.
Yeah, it's like a 1, right? I don't think you look at that overall combo, because he's so dependent on Nikola. And I don't like doing that, where it's like everything is about Nikola. Everything has to be about Nikola. I don't like doing that. But I do think that in this case with his skill set, you have to. We're going to finish up talking about this. I know everybody's like, where are the player grades? I will drag him onto this show after. We'll just record one and we'll have it up for you tomorrow.
That's a good idea, actually.
And we'll knock out the rest of them. So tomorrow you can catch this if you go to youtube.com/LockedOnNuggets or on your favorite podcast. On the other side, we'll finish up this conversation because I really have enjoyed this because I think you'll learn stuff from conversations like this. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Nuggets. When it comes to grocery shopping and meal planning, I've had this ongoing problem. I just don't have the time between work life and trying to eat healthier. I was constantly feeling stressed out. I go to the grocery store, buy things I didn't need, and then end up with no time to actually cook. Sticking to your health goals, that was a struggle too. But everything changed when I discovered Hungry Root. Honestly, it's a game changer. It's the easiest way to eat healthy without all the stress. With Hungry Root, it's like having a personal shopper and a nutritionist all in one. They take care of your grocery shopping, recommend meals and groceries based on your taste and health goals, from anti-inflammatory to high protein and gluten-free options. The best part, every meal is ready in 15 minutes or less. I'm talking quick, healthy meals that actually taste great, all delivered straight to your door. It's been a huge time saver, and it's made eating healthy so much simpler. You're going to love Hungry Root as much as I do. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box and a free item in every box for life. Just go to hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA. That's hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA, code LockedOnNBA to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA, code LockedOnNBA. Don't miss out. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for joining us. I want to be very clear on this. I get ramped up and I get excited about these things, and obviously I can take exacerbatory views on this. I think it's really interesting to talk to Ryan about this because we disagree.
Yeah.
Because there's things of the fact of Ryan's got a really good view of how to assess young players and look at the optimism. And I look at young players and I only see what is. And the reason I kind of do that is not a matter of my lacking imagination. It's that my experience has taught me of so many misses, of so many guys that I believed in and was like, he's going to be great. He could do this. And there's only so many of those that you can live through with them only reaching half of their potential before you're like, some guys get it and some guys don't.
Yeah.
And then when you're trying to assess things in the league, there's kind of two parts of this. One is I want to credit the guys that have done it. If you could, you could do the thing, do it, and I'll give you the reward for that. I will praise you. I'll sing your praises and raise the hype on you, but you got to do it first. And the other thing is, with KCP being a primary example, the real reason there's all these little tiny things about execution, stuff that Mike has gotten way better at. But even last year, there were times when it was he's in the wrong spot. Not supposed to be there. Jokic is yelling at him.
He does that this year too. Honestly, there was a game earlier this year where I was like, I am so frustrated watching Michael Porter Jr. right now because he's standing where Nikola Jokic is supposed to be standing. How do you possibly do that? So there are aspects of his game that of course still need to be ironed out. He can still be a space cadet at times. There's no doubt about that. But I think that given the 2023 run, but also given so many of the playoff performances that he's had before that and after that, the Lakers series was great.
Yep.
I think that the Portland series back in 2021 was great for him because he was locked by Norman Powell at one point. And then he had 25 points in a quarter in the very next game and really turned that around on its head and found ways to be adaptable. And that, in that moment, I was reminded, okay, he can do this. He can, you can show growth. You can understand, okay, this is not always going to be, you're never going to not be able to do this. I think that there's reason to believe that guys like that, once they show you the thing, can continue to improve. It doesn't just mean, you don't have to, get them to that place and then only talk about them at this place. You can project if they're moving this direction, you can assume that the direction continues to go that direction to a point.
Sure. But you're talking about two different things. You said you keep using can and could.
Yeah. That's what happens with young players because they often have so much time in front of them.
That's potential.
Sure.
It's not reality. Now, if you want to say, I think based off of the curve, it's reasonable to assume he will do this.
Yeah. And that's really what I'm talking about here.
So you should use that language better because I think it's a stronger argument for you.
Kind of, because like I think that, okay, so if a guy averages 19 points per game on 65% true shooting in his age 21 season or whatever he did in 2021, and then he has a 25-point first quarter against the Portland Trailblazers in the playoffs, not like the highest bar, it's something that I can assume over the course of the rest of his career that he can replicate, that he can continue to do, that he can continue to improve in different categories and get better at. I think that there are benchmarks that you reach throughout your career where you're reminded, okay, remember that moment as a young player and remember where they were at that place and where they were going after that place. Because so often you are reminded of those moments where guys then use that as a springboard. They'll use that as a
with the guys. So here's a question. What do you do with the guys that don't get there, that plateau?
There's those guys too. Absolutely. You can't win them all like with these young guys.
So you should just bet on it every time?
I think you have to bet on the right people. You can't just bet on it every single time, of course. I think with Mike, you're betting on the talent. You're betting on a guy that was a previous number 1 pick candidate in the NBA draft before the injuries hurt him.
That's good.
I think you're talking about somebody who was one of the greatest high school players we've ever seen play basketball. And assuming that he's not going to improve, I always thought was crazy, given that like it was
so here's the thing though. Here's the thing. So it's not assuming he's not going to improve. That's the difference. To you, there is that's how I think you view it, which is interesting. Of like, you're either saying he's going to improve this year or you think he's never going to improve. And instead it's, no, this is where he is. And each step that he takes, he gets reevaluated as that.
Yeah.
As he takes that, he gets reevaluated there.
I'm constantly looking forward. That's something in my ethos that I'm always trying to project. I'm always trying to predict. That's always something that I've always.
And I think it's reasonable, but I also think that what you wind up doing though, is you wind up putting the cart before the horse. I
get it wrong all the time.
Right. And I don't want to do that. Like, I want to be accurate. That's my biggest thing is I want to be able to look at Mike and be like, this is who he is. This is where he's at right now. Now, if we're having a discussion on ESPN about if the list was project every player to hit all the utmost reasonable potential for this season, then you're right. Michael Porter Jr. was too low at 89. Then you're right. Because that's how you viewed it, was if everybody takes a step forward that's under 30, and if everybody over 30 dies, then what you have then
it gets slightly worse.
then what you have then is you have a totally different construct. But that to me, I think, is the divide here, is that you're looking at it from really okay, if we don't assume a plateau, if we don't factor in that probability, right? Because even if you were to tell me Porter gets better, but I'm not going to tell you how much better. Like he's not like I had him, 74.
Yeah.
He's better next season. You got to guess where he's going to wind up. I would have said, okay, I'm going to move him to 59.
I'm at 65.
So, yeah.
It's not crazy. I mean, and here's the thing. Like, last point I want to make, and then we should probably get out of here.
Yep.
I think that knowing Mike, we don't really know these guys, obviously. Like, we have a picture based off of who they've been, and we've been around for 7 years. Knowing who he is and knowing how much he cares and knowing what he values on the basketball court, I'm willing to bet on that player continuing to improve. Now, there are certain things I don't think he'll ever be able to do. I don't think he's ever going to be an all-star. I don't think he's ever going to be a guy that fully handles the rock and is able to make decisions for an offense to the point where he's going to put up all-star production. But in terms of getting better, I think he's going to improve marginally across the board in a lot of these different categories. And it might come at the expense of defense. And that's, I think, what we've seen here. But I do think that there's a precedent historically, but specifically with Michael Porter Jr., that it's fair to assume that he will continue to improve because he has always done so.
DTSC I have a question for Ryan and Matt. Who's better, DeAndre Hunter or MPJ?
I will still go Michael Porter Although DeAndre Hunter has made it a conversation this year. He's been a lot better this year. He's one of those guys that like has shown some growth, like and did show some things early on in his career, but also showed like that might be just who he is, like just solid. I think Mike has shown some star potential. He's not going to get there, I don't think, but DeAndre Hunter is now, I think, evened up that race a little bit this season.
Well said. Unfortunately, DeAndre Hunter's 27, so rest in peace. We'll be
he's
back
dead
tomorrow
now.
with another episode. We will actually give you player grades. Expect that around noon tomorrow Mountain Time. We'll do that for you right now, and you will have that in your inbox. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us. We'll see you guys again next time on Locked On Nuggets.
They're all dead.